Individual and Community Preparedness webinar series. My name is Allison Albright, and I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be available on the FEMA website in the coming weeks. You should hear audio through your computer speaker, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. In the bottom right-hand corner, we ask if you would like to receive news and updates from Region 2. If so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see there's a Q&A pod also in the lower left-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it by clicking the download button. And just another additional note, the camera function today will only be used for our presenters. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Region 2 Community Preparedness Officer to introduce our speakers and today's proceedings.
Thanks, Allison. Did you know that community gardens can serve as a form of community bonding and resilience building? Today we'll be hearing from Isles Inc. in Trenton, New Jersey, who will discuss how school and community gardens are an integral part of the 40-year history of their community development and environmental nonprofit work. Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Costa, the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2. On behalf of our team working to strengthen preparedness across New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, I'd like to welcome you to our preparedness webinar series. The Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Program is focused on preparing individuals and communities for disasters by providing useful information and training, inspiring people to act and be ready for any emergency. Our two speakers today are Jim Simon and Bitnari Kim. Jim is the Deputy Director of Community Planning. He oversees urban agriculture services, vacant lot stabilization, mobile recreation, neighborhood grants, and public art projects for Isles Inc. In his 13 years at Isles, he has conducted numerous workshops on gardening basics, organic growing, composting, beekeeping, rain gardens, rain barrel building, and cooking using seasonal produce. Jim has been involved in environmental and youth education for over 30 years. He is a master gardener, having been trained through Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County. He is a member of the New Jersey Beekeepers Association and is on the board of the Trenton Cycling Revolution, a bicycling advocacy group. Bitnari Kim is an urban agriculture coordinator. Bitnari coordinates support for school and community gardens and related education. As a library associate in Maryland, she created environmental justice, gardening, and STEM programming for children and teens. She also worked as an intern at Green City in Paterson, New Jersey, where she was responsible for harvesting and processing crops to bring to pop-up farm stands in food deserts. Bitnari also worked in visitor services for both the New Jersey Park Services and National Park Service. She graduated from Rutgers with a BS in Environmental Policy and minor in Spanish. Welcome, Jim and Bitnari, and I'd like to turn the floor over to you both.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us today. And happy Earth Day, everyone. I hope you can all get outside and spend some time in nature. So Bitnari and I are going to tag team the presentation, so we're going to go back and forth here, but I'm going to start off with an introduction. So Isles is a community development and environmental nonprofit. We've been working in Trenton for over 40 years. So here are some of the pillars of our work. We train and educate. So we run an alternative high school for kids who have dropped out of school or been in contact with the juvenile justice system. So they come to us to get their high school equivalency or diploma, but then they learn construction and building trades as well. We also run a Center for Energy and Environmental Training. So we are teaching people green jobs, weatherization, energy efficiency work there. Build wealth is another pillar of ours. So we help families purchase homes, so we run first-time home buyers workshops. We've done a lot of foreclosure assistance in the past 10 or 12 years, and working with financial fitness, so people have the means to save for a home and make wise financial decisions. Promote green and healthy living. That's where the community gardens come in, but then also working to improve parks, increase open space, and also make sure that homes are healthy. I'll talk a little bit about this later, but lead contamination is a serious issue in the city of Trenton, and older housing stock has other issues that can contribute negatively to the health of families. So you're talking about mold, pests, other things like that. And really our main pillar, which is related to all these other preceding ones, is revitalize communities. So we use all these other different tools in the toolbox to really improve the health and the fabric of communities. So it's really grounded in placemaking principles, so making sure that communities are healthy, vibrant places where people can live, work, and play. So here's a little short timeline of ISLE's environmental history. So 40 years ago, one of the earliest things that we did was help community members start gardens. And that's something that we've been doing successfully over the whole course of our history. One issue with urban cities, they have a legacy of environmental and industrial contamination. So there are serious issues in the city of Trenton with lead contamination from historically the pottery industry, but then also manufacturing and also lead paint too. So before we start a garden, we want to make sure that the soil is safe to grow in. So through extensive testing of these sites, we found these issues of serious contamination. That led us to doing more work on brownfield, so converting these contaminated sites, remediating them, and putting them back into productive use, so helping develop housing, doing economic development through brownfields reuse, so working with partners throughout the city, and including the city of Trenton to do that. So through doing the work on the brownfields and the gardens and homes, we realized, again, that lead was a serious issue. Everyone's aware of the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. In the city of Trenton, in 10 cities, kids have higher levels of lead in their blood than they do in Flint, Michigan. And it's not because of the water, it's because of lead paint in the home. So lead dust from friction surfaces, and also kids are ingesting lead paint as well. So it's important to kind of mitigate these hazards to make sure the kids' brains and bodies develop fully. And in 2009, we established the Center for Energy and Environmental Training. So where we're doing the lead testing, we're doing the home renovation, so taking out windows or surfaces that are contaminated with lead, making sure that water intrusion is not a problem with older roofs and leading to mold and other issues, and making sure that the homes are energy efficient. So homeowners have lower utility costs, so they're putting more money in the bank there. So all of this comprehensive work is really based locally, so training community health workers, doing the home assessments, providing additional training for folks, but then also working on larger policy issues to find funding to really deal with this issue of lead poisoning in cities in America. So I mentioned placemaking earlier. So all of our urban agriculture work is part of our community planning and development work. Again, we use these different tools in the toolkit to address issues in the city of Trenton. So it could be developing gardens, it could be organizing neighbors to work together. So really we're changing how people see public space, how they interact with it, and we give them the tools that they can change it for themselves. So someone may not be able to go out and build a new housing development or build a house, but building a garden or doing a community event is a quick and easy way to really have a quick transformation in a particular place. And placemaking is participatory. We don't just go plop down a garden or do a project. We really want to engage residents in the process as well. So here are a few examples of some arts-based development projects that we're doing. So we've got some in the upper right, some community art projects, which are then displayed in the lower corner at an all-day arts festival that goes to different galleries and parks and public spaces throughout the city. Top left, this is called a parklet. It's a temporary park that we put up in basically like a no parking zone to help support local businesses. So got planters and platforms, and then we programmed it with, music and, kind of interactive activities there. And lower right is really just activating public space. So it's one thing to improve a park, but you really need to kind of give people the tools or find ways to engage them so they can enjoy it. In the city of Trenton, there's been a lot of disinvestment, so there's a lot of issues with crime and safety. So it's really about reclaiming public space and letting people know that they have the right to use them. So here are a couple examples here. On the top, we've got some before and after pictures. Upper left is a abandoned park, basically, that became a dumping ground, and it was also a contaminated industrial site. So we took out excavated the contaminated fill, brought in clean fill, and then developed a children's garden there. And on the bottom, here's some examples of some housing projects that we've done. So instead of building new homes or demolishing old homes, finding ways to rehab existing housing stock and really make neighborhoods stable on a block-to-block basis. And here on the right-hand side, you can see the finished housing. And this is just kind of a traffic no man's land here. So this is an example of a parklet. So we built planters with integrated seating so people can just come, hang out here and enjoy some time outside. And this is near a local health center and just up the street from a local school, which actually hosts a garden as well. Here's another example. This was a formerly abandoned property. It's an old carriage house. So this is what was left of after the street side building was demolished. So we developed this, and then we've given access to it to a local artist group that's based out of the local soup kitchen. So they're doing all kinds of fun events here, and we incorporated a garden so they can just enjoy time and sit outside. But then we put up some public mural panels as well. And we did a recreation study in one neighborhood which found that it was really not served. The facilities were not in good shape, and there really wasn't enough programming, so people didn't really feel welcome or didn't really feel like there were enough offerings there. So one of the services that we developed as a result of that survey was called T-Rex. It stands for Trenton Recreation. And we got an old bread truck and filled it up with sporting goods equipment. So we take that to vacant lots and parks and community events to provide pop-up recreation for people of all ages. So we're really here to talk about our urban agriculture work as one of these tools in the toolkit. So again, this is really about taking underutilized public space, putting it back into productive use, and using it as a way to connect neighbors and the community. So I really see community gardens as kind of training wheels for civic engagement. So if you can get a bunch of people from different backgrounds to work together for a common goal, that could be the roots of a civic association. Or you can get those people together to go to a city council meeting to advocate for repaving a street or dealing with other issues. So it's kind of a win-win-win proposition. And I'll give you a few maps here to kind of give you an idea of what the food and kind of what the layout of Trenton itself is like here. So we did a vacant property survey with Rutgers and community volunteers about 6 years ago. We redid the process again just 2 years ago. The city knew that there was an issue with vacant properties, but they didn't really have hard data on the extent of it. So we went out with basically tablets and residents to do quick assessments on all the tax parcels in the city. So close to a quarter of the tax parcels in the city of Trenton are either vacant land So you can see the kind of lighter brown areas around the city, and also vacant buildings, or the kind of yellowish orange there. So it's pretty pervasive throughout the city, but then there's a lot of concentrations of vacancy. So that causes a host of other issues. Crime, you've got problems with pests, you've got environmental issues there. So working on trying to give recommendations to the city to how they can deal with this problem. So they've adopted some of those, like vacant property auctions, and being more aggressive about reclaiming the land from absentee landlords. And I think someone put the link in the chat. Restoring Trenton is the website that hosts all that information. So overlaying that, the slide shows you a little bit about food access in the city. So Trenton has 85,000 residents, but really only one full-service supermarket to serve all those people. There's a lot of other smaller groceries, but most of the food really comes from corner stores. So some of you may have heard of the term food desert, where you kind of perceive an absence of food, like there's nothing there. More people now are using the term food swamp. So you can get healthy food, but it's harder to get to. You kind of have to wade through all these unhealthy options and do a lot of work to find the healthy food. And to overlay that, this shows you the distribution of the 70 school and community gardens that we support. So it really shows you how gardens can provide fresh food on a really hyper-local basis. And unfortunately, a lot of residents go out of the city to get to the full-service supermarket. So there's a lot of economic leakage. So trying to find ways that you can support healthy food through economic development is a really critical issue. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bitnari, and she's going to talk about ISLE's Garden Support Network.
Thanks, Jim. So one of the many ways that we support community resiliency in urban agriculture is through our ISLE's Garden Support Network. And through this network, we provide technical, organizational, and educational support for over 70 school and community gardens, and that number is increasing each year. And we are able to serve over 1,000 students, about 45 to 50 teachers, and over 200 gardeners. And we're often contacted by people or organizations who want to turn vacant or underutilized land into gardens. So when they reach out to us, we'll go out and conduct site assessments so that we can determine sun and water access as well as soil quality. If the soil isn't contaminated, we are able to till the land so that they can grow or plant directly into the ground. But we have also built and placed many garden beds for sites that do have soil contamination. We also recruit and organize gardeners, so we place them in community gardens throughout Trenton, or we place them in our incubator garden, which I will discuss in a later slide. And we also provide free gardening workshops that are open to the public, and we discuss things like soil health, pest management, garden troubleshooting, composting, weeding, and harvesting. And we also provide seeds, seedlings, and fertilizer as well. And then for community gardens, we've also been able to provide compost and mulch so that the community gardens can be very successful. So this is an aerial view of one of our main gardens at Tucker Street. The top left portion of the garden is the incubator garden, which has about 12 raised garden beds with trellises. And this is provided to beginner or new gardeners who need a little bit more hands-on guidance. So they have access to these garden beds for a full year. And during that time, we kind of coach them through the gardening process so that after a year, when they're successful and have gained a lot of knowledge, we can place them in community gardens. And then the bottom portion of this picture is our production side. So we grow a lot of food for to bring to farmers markets and to donate to emergency food providers. And then this is another angle of the garden that we just saw. We grow a lot of herbs, greens, and other veggies, and we try to max out our growing space because we want to make sure that we're bringing a lot of produce to the farmers markets to give out to the community and also to donate it to emergency food providers. This is one of the events that we offer through the Isles Garden Support Network. It's a plant distribution. So we offer two plant distributions. We offer cool weather crops and warm weather crops. This picture is from a cool weather crop distribution, and this is where we distribute hundreds of pounds of seeds, seedlings, and fertilizer. The seedlings that we provide are grown for us by a farm program at a correctional facility. So we provide the seeds and soil, and they grow the seeds or the seedlings for us, and they gain greenhouse skills and growing experience. Then we go and pick up these seedlings and distribute them back out into the community. And we get a lot of seed donations through seed companies every year, so we're able to stock seeds at the Free Seed Library at the Trenton Free Public Library so that community members who aren't part of our garden support network can still go out and get seeds so they can grow food for themselves. In the colder months, we put plastic over our greenhouse or our hoop house to extend the growing season. We want to make sure that we can keep providing and donating food to emergency food providers all year long. And then in the summer, we take the plastic off, and again, we're trying to maximize our growing space. So we put wire meshing over our hoop house and plant beans along the edges of it to climb up that wire meshing, and then we keep planting in the greenhouse as well. So this is a picture of some past incubator gardeners who are really excited and ready to get their hands in the soil and growing their own food. And again, this is before they've planted out their garden beds, so you're looking at some fresh beds. They're filled with compost that will help them become successful gardeners. And then in this next slide is just an example of how much food can be grown in one raised garden bed. And a lot of times our incubator gardeners will share their harvest with their family, friends, and neighbors, and also just people walking along the street because they have such an overabundance of food. This is Yolanda. She's a previous incubator gardener, and this is her with her harvest. You can grow a lot of different things in one raised garden bed, and she's now graduated to a community garden, but she still drops by our incubator garden to visit or ask questions. And also a lot of previous incubator gardeners or community gardeners drop by just to network with each other. So a couple of years ago, we got a donation from the Fruit Tree Planting Foundation to plant a community orchard. So they donated about 60 fruit trees, including apples, pears, peaches, cherries, plums, persimmons, and nectarines. And the great thing about this is, well, one is that they were planted by volunteers and students from the alternative high school, but it also gives the community access to healthy and organic fruits. So they're welcome to come pick the fruits as they become ripe at any time. They don't have to pay anything. They just come up and pick the fruits right off the trees. So every year we work with the Howell Living History Farm to bring their horses out to one of the largest and oldest community gardens in Trenton, and they do a horse plow. So it's usually a really big event, and it brings together the neighborhood, the community gardeners, and students from a nearby school, and they can learn about alternative agricultural techniques. We also provide some beekeeping and composting workshops as well. In this picture, you can see a student guiding the plow behind the horses, so it's a really great way to expose the kids to different ways to farm. And then this is the same garden later in the season. It's flourishing with harvest goodness. And as I mentioned, this garden, Chestnut Garden, is one of the oldest and largest gardens in Trenton. It serves about
16 to 18 gardeners, and they all come from diverse backgrounds. So we have Black, Hispanic, South Asian, and African gardeners, and they also bring in their family and friends and neighbors as well. So a lot of people benefit from the garden outside of just the 16 to 18 gardeners that plant here. And not only does the garden provide food for the community, but it also provides a really beautiful green space for the neighborhood to look out at. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Betnari. So gardens and open space improvements that we work on also provide ecosystem services. So gardens are not just for food production. We try to incorporate these other green infrastructure features into them as well. So that can include rain gardens, rainwater catchment systems, rain barrels that people can use in their homes, community forestry, which includes tree planting and tree care, increasing the amount of open space, and all this green space also provides stormwater management and flood mitigation. So that ties into environmental resiliency as well. So here's an example of a large rain garden that we worked with Rutgers Water Resources using some funding from the Clean Water Act federal funds to do green infrastructure demonstration projects. So again, we don't just like build a garden or plop down a rain garden, here you go. We really want to make sure that this is participatory. So we worked with teachers and students to actually install the rain garden. So we had a few of the classes actually come out and help plant these native grasses and perennials in here. So they've got some ownership in there. They understand the concept. So this is a way to expose students to environmental careers. And we're installing a garden at a middle school. So, you know, we bring the soil and the kids actually participate in doing the installation as well. And a couple slides down the road, I'll show you an interesting water catchment system that was installed to go with this garden. And these beds were actually built by students from our alternative high school. So they built it as one of their construction projects, and they went to help us install it. And it turns out when we met the teachers there, students from Isles Youth Institute, they were actually students there when they were younger. So they recognized the teacher. It's a good kind of chance to catch up and then show off their handiwork. And this is a large 1,500-gallon cistern that captures about a third of the rainwater off the roof of our Tucker Street facility. And this is used to water the garden or water the community orchard. We have an electric pump in here which helps run our drip irrigation system. So, you know, when this is full, it can provide water, about a week's worth of water for the garden. And this was the catchment system that we put in at the school from a couple slides ago. So this is kind of unique. A old-fashioned farm pump was put in there so the kids can fill their watering cans. So they get an understanding of rainwater harvest, but then also, you know, fluid dynamics and physics. And it also keeps the kids occupied too. So that, you know, the number of beds in the garden is kind of small. So when you have a class of 20 kids out there, you know, everybody can't be digging in the dirt at the same time. So if you've got some alternative activities for other kids to go fetch the water, perfect. And here's some of our crew installing a couple rain barrels at a garden for the Boys and Girls Club. And also on the back side of the garden, we worked with them to develop a rain garden. So we strategically located the downspouts to run off into a planted area that contains native plants. And here's a rain garden being installed again at Tucker Street. So you can see that cistern from a few slides ago in the background. So anything that doesn't end up in the cistern is absorbed by the rain garden. And there's an elevated spout, kind of a green tube in the middle. And since we installed this, I've never seen excess water actually need to go into that kind of overflow spout there. So we're keeping rainwater out of the stormwater system. And here we're running a build your own rain barrel workshop using curriculum from Rutgers Water Resources. So these are reclaimed food grade barrels. So we put put valves on them, we put sieves on them to keep mosquitoes out, and we show people how they can connect them at home. And there's another small catchment container on the shade structure in the Tucker Street garden there. And that's used by the folks in the incubator garden to hand water their plots so they can understand when their plants need water and when they don't. And here's a tree planting project. So we've been supporting community forestry in the city of Trenton for 40 years. So doing tree planting projects, doing tree assessments, and just trying to find opportunities to increase tree coverage in the city of Trenton. And we're working with a local school here. You know, the kids have, again, a stake in ownership here. And it was cute. Some of the kids actually named some of their trees. So they're really kind of giving them a personality and kind of understanding how to value trees. And you know, another ecosystem service that trees and gardens and open green space provides is improving air quality in a city that has a lot of industrial manufacturing and major roadways going around and through the city. So anytime you can increase the amount of green space and tree coverage, you're helping to alleviate the effects of air pollution. And back to Bitnari.
All right, so one of the other ways that we provide support for urban agriculture is through youth education, and we do this by providing support for school gardens, and we provide after-school and summer programming, and we also do nutrition education and farm-to-school activities with our food corps members, and we also promote environmental education. So this is another one of the gardens that we manage. It's within a city park that Jim was mentioning earlier. It's a children's garden in Roberto Clemente Park, and it's located directly across from a public pool. So in the summer, we get a lot of families stopping by, and then throughout the year, we have a lot of students stopping by on their walk home from school. And they come by and explore the different vegetables that are growing in the raised garden beds. And then not pictured here is the perennial garden area that they can walk through and look at different pollinators. They also lounge under the gazebo, and then there's also a bamboo maze that they can kind of explore as well. So one of our goals is to have a garden at every school in the city, and we're pretty close to meeting that goal. So pictured here are some raised garden beds that we built and installed at an elementary school. We use untreated lumber, and then we fill the beds with compost so that the plants have a really good success rate. And then we also make sure that there's a lot of community buy-in and support from the school in terms of the administrators and the teachers, because we work with so many school and community gardens, we can't always be around to take care of every single garden. So having that community buy-in is really integral to the success of each school garden. And then this is one of the garden beds we just saw after it has been planted. These are two students with their hands on some cauliflower that they helped grow. And a part of community resiliency starts with children and healthy eating. And we find that children are more inclined to try and like healthy foods if they can grow it themselves. We also try to plant perennial and annual plants and flowers to increase pollinator habitats and to make sure that there's different things growing there year after year outside of just vegetables. And then in order to increase engagement in the schools, we post garden happenings on bulletin boards to show what's growing, what things they can look forward to, and how they can get involved. So we try to plant spaces whether or not they can be used for food production. In this picture, we see a teacher standing in front of a space that wasn't completely used for food production. We did plant a couple of tomatoes here, but you see mostly flowers, and that helps bring natural beauty to an underutilized space. So the school didn't have space for us to drop raised garden beds, so what we did was we brought old wine barrels that we sawed in half and used those as planters so that students could still grow food. And as you can see, they grew a lot of different things in just a few of these barrel planters. And then the teacher that we saw in the previous slide, she has a classroom kitchen, so she leads a lot of the gardening and classroom cooking classes. So going back to what I mentioned about getting students to enjoy healthy eating, one of the best ways we're able to get kids excited about eating the food they grow is through classroom cooking and taste tests. So we provide kid-safe kitchen utensils and cooking materials, and then they all work together to create a recipe. And this is an example of a taste test we did. The kids made a spinach salad with a basic vinaigrette dressing, and then they try it and mark off whether they loved it, liked it, or if it just wasn't for them. As you can see, a lot of kids really loved it, and even the ones who didn't like it, at least they tried it, and that's a huge success. So here's an example of how children can be engaged in environmental education through an outdoor classroom. You don't have to wear an apple costume, but being outdoors and having access to school gardens and the right resources can draw active engagement and excitement from the students. Another benefit to school gardens is that it attracts a variety of pollinators, so the children can get excited for different reasons, like meeting and observing pollinator friends. And then another way that we facilitate youth education is through summer camps. We run a summer camp called Camp Carrot, where local children can come join us for a few weeks. They spend the day getting their hands dirty, they harvest and prepare meals together. They do activities related to the environment and nutrition, and we also take them on field trips as well. And then we also try to make sure that the garden is used for activities outside of gardening as well. So we offer healthy recreational activities such as yoga. So we had a yoga instructor come and lead a class with the Camp Carrot students. And then this past summer, even with the pandemic, we were able to continue our environmental and nutritional education. We held virtual workshops with the local camp. And then after the camp was over, we invited the families to come out to the garden for a little ceremony where they were able to harvest flowers and vegetables to take home. And I'll send this back to Jim.
Thanks, Benari. So I'll talk a little bit about food access, but then talk about different ways that community gardens promote resiliency. And I'll talk about resiliency from a food access perspective, from an environmental aspect, but then also an emotional aspect as well. So last year during the pandemic, we realized that people couldn't always access garden spaces or were really limited to home. So we came up with the idea of distributing grow kits, which are planters, soil, seedlings, fertilizer, seeds, and instructions for success. And I'll show a slide of that here in a little bit. We also promote fresh food outlets, including farmers markets, emergency food providers, corner stores, and community-supported agriculture. And we also promote food literacy as well through nutrition education. So here's an example of the grow kit. And this is an easy way for people to get started on their windowsill or out, if they've got a porch area or front steps. And it has information so they can connect with our community garden network in the future if they're interested in scaling up. And here we are distributing grow kits at one of the emergency feeding sites this past summer in the city park. So people were coming to get their weekly supply of groceries, but then they are also able to get these grow kits as well. So here's a slide from our farmers market. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we sell herbs, flowers, honey, and produce here at affordable rates. And we really promote organic agriculture. We're not organically certified, but we grow using these natural methods and really promote that to our gardeners. You know, there's so many issues with being unsure of what your food was grown or treated with. So being able to grow it yourself or know how it was grown can really let you kind of like trust the source and not worry about, chemicals from different sources. So here's our crew at the farmers market. And this is also a great recruitment opportunity for community gardeners as well. And one great thing about this market, we helped start this with the YMCA and some other local partners. It provides matching benefits. So for folks who are using their WIC or senior farmers market vouchers or EBT, the market doubles and sometimes even triples their benefits. So if you bring in $5 worth of vouchers, you can get $10 or more to purchase produce. And studies have shown that even when the matching benefits go away, that people still attend and support these markets. There's another example of some produce here. And this is a garden that we installed at an emergency food provider. So this is a vacant lot that had a building that had burned, and we worked with the social service agency to get the city to demolish the building in order for us to develop a garden. And these beds were all built by our Youth Institute students and installed with volunteers from local schools and corporations. So this garden is amazingly productive for such a narrow space. So they put this right into their emergency food supplies. And it's also a great way for patrons to get engaged in gardening. So this could be a step towards self-sufficiency. So if they become interested in growing their own food, we can help them. And here's another example of a small garden at another food pantry that we support. And here's one of the donations. This was about a year or so ago, right before a really hard frost in the fall. So a lot of this food was going to go to waste if it wasn't harvested. So we'll go out to community gardens or our own production spaces and just harvest everything possible. So you've got a lot of peppers, sweet peppers, hot peppers, tomatoes, different things like that. And food literacy. So we do nutrition education, but we also run family cooking workshops. And one of our staff members is a master preserver. So she teaches classes on food preservation. So we're making salsa and canning late summer vegetables to preserve the harvest. So this church has a commercial kitchen. They're actually part of our garden support network. So it's relationships like these which allow us to continue to do this education. And here's Christina on our staff with this gigantic cabbage that we grew. And the thing on the right is a mobile bread house. It's an old boat trailer that an artist friend had turned into this bread house. So it's got a wood-fired oven on the front. You can flop down a ramp. You walk up into it, and we provide the bread dough. People can make little flatbreads or pizzas. We bake them in the oven, and then they get to taste them. So this is a thing that we can take around to community events or parks or gardens just to get people excited about food. And talking about resiliency from an environmental perspective, so increasing green space gives people a place to go, and studies have shown that even being in proximity to a park or green space improves your sense of well-being. So it's important to have green space and find ways for people to engage in it. There's a concept called biophilia where people have this innate connection to natural things. So that's why people talk to their plants. That's why we cuddle our pets. That's why we seek connection with each other. And the more time that we spend in front of the Zoom or with our cell phones in front of our face, we're kind of reducing that connection. So, this is really our way to promote engagement and kind of promote that sense of connection with each other and with the natural world. And talking about resilience from an environmental perspective, I talked a little bit about stormwater management. Communities like Trenton are really faced with disinvestment and a legacy of environmental pollution and the legacy of poor urban design. So you've got pollution from manufacturing, you've got brownfields, you've got roads running through and around a city, really increasing conditions related to that, whether it's asthma or cancer or other things like that. So it's really a challenge, but it's really important to really kind of reclaim these spaces for people and put them to productive use. And I'll turn it back over to Benari to talk about beekeeping.
Great. So another aspect of our urban agriculture work includes beekeeping. We manage over 12 hives in the Trenton area, and that helps provide pollinator education as well as improving pollination in the Trenton area gardens. We also extract and sell our honey from our bees at local outlets such as tea and coffee shops, farmers markets, and most recently, we started selling to a museum. So we regularly inspect our hives and keep an educational beehive at the Tucker Street Garden so that we can teach kids and people visiting the garden about the benefits of pollinators and the wonders of bees and beekeeping. We have protective gear that people can put on so they can get closer to the hives and see what it entails to do a bee inspection. And even though we have protective clothing, we also have an observation beehive, which is an enclosed glass beehive so that people can see what the bees are doing through the safety of a glass barrier. In this picture, the bees are all out right now, but in this next slide, you see that the bees are back in the enclosed glass case, and this is a student from the alternative high school observing the hive. So this educational or observation beehive can swivel so you can see both sides of the frames and see exactly what they're doing. And the bees are able to get in and out of their hive through a tube that is behind this blue box here at the bottom. And we do have observational beehives and the regular beehives, but we also have educational bee frames that we put into bee boxes. So some of the frames include pictures and information about bees, their life cycle, and their work roles. And others just have old combs so that kids can see what they look like up close without the danger of being stung by the bees. This is me during an inspection. I'm holding a really beautiful frame of wax that the bees have built out on their own. They didn't need foundation. They just created that frame all by themselves. And in this frame, the bees have started putting away honey. So the top kind of center part of this picture is capped honey. So when the bees have fanned out all the excess moisture from the cells, they put wax cappings over it so that they can puncture, get rid of the wax, and then eat the honey for themselves whenever they'd like to. This is a closer look at our apiary. This is where we hold most of our beehives, and they all have various honey supers and deep boxes on them. And our honey is so delicious. Here's a bee trying to get the honey back that we harvested. But not to worry, we're really mindful of how much honey we harvest from the bees, and we make sure that we leave plenty for the bees to eat and to survive through the winter. We really do our best to keep the bees happy and healthy, and in return, they provide us with New Jersey's best tasting honey for 2 years now. So that concludes our presentation. These are the best ways to get in touch with us or follow our work. Our social media handle across all social media platforms is @ISLES Inc. I really hope that we've provided some inspiration and information for you to start gardening. Wherever you live, it doesn't matter. It has so many benefits, not only for yourself and for community resiliency, but also for the environment. Thank you.
Jim and Bitnari, thank you so much. I got to tell you, I am like so blown away by the work you're doing. I am an avid gardener myself, everything from houseplants to vegetables to flowers. And during your presentation, I actually texted my son, we need to go buy a beehive, you know. So we do have a number of questions for you. So we'll just go through them now. Do you have a referral for soil testing and funding for the cost of the test?
So soil testing we've done through a number of outlets over the course of our history. One of the best kind of go-to solutions is your local cooperative extension office. So we've done testing with Rutgers. We've done mail order testing with Cornell. Also the USDA, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, has helped us do some testing. They have some very good soil health initiatives, so they've helped us test some prospective garden plots and have actually done tabled at conferences that we've been at where they've let community gardeners bring in their soil samples to test right on the site. But yeah, I would recommend looking into local land-grant university or cooperative extension first.
Thanks, Jim. Can you please suggest ways to engage the rural community and encourage participation in the community garden? I'm going to continue to read this. Out here in God's country, families tend to be super self-sufficient and many grow their own family gardens. I see the absolute value in community gardening, building, and nurturing community resilience, but the rural folks are very difficult to get buy-in from. Any suggestions?
Sure. You know, food access is not just an issue in urban communities, it's an issue in rural communities as well. So I come from Nebraska. I grew up on a family farm there. I couldn't get away fast enough, but then I realized how important that was to live in a community where you're helping each other out and you're connecting through food. So I'm just using kind of those same problem-solving skills and philosophies there. So I guess it's just trying to find, you know, common ground there. So whether it's through schools could be a good opportunity to, you know, develop some community gardeners through like Future Farmers of America. You know, we support gardens at faith-based institutions as well, and you know, most of them have a mission to donate all that food, or they have incorporated environmentalism into their mission.
I like it. Thank you. Have you noticed, have home preserving groups developed out of these community gardens to stock and supply community food closets?
To my knowledge, I don't know. Usually when people are doing the canning or preserving, it's for their own use. But you know, I would like to scale that up. I know some places have community kitchens where you know they've got more capacity to kind of teach this and to allow people to do that. So I think that's, you know, that's a great goal.
Okay. Work with any government agencies, and what types of partners can I work with to do this in my community?
Oh yeah, we work with the whole range of folks. So we rely on some federal support. So we're in the middle of a USDA Farm to School grant right now that helps us expand capacity for garden education in schools. So some of the green infrastructure work is federal money, but then, you know, we'll work with a school to hold a bake sale to enable another school of need to develop a community garden. So really be creative and look for partners wherever you can.
Okay. Do you have any guidelines for selling the idea to community leadership, ways to kind of get their buy-in?
Well, you could, you know, look for other examples or best practices so you can find a community that's similar to your own One great resource is the American Community Garden Association, and they've got great toolkits on how to start a community garden, how to establish a structure, how to find resources and funding.
Thank you. How can FEMA and USDA funds be leveraged by states to scale out this kind of urban ag model? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So expand existing funding. So, supporting feeding programs is important. I know NRCS, which is part of USDA, they have launched some innovative urban agriculture funding, working on the soil health initiatives. But, the grant funding, it's very competitive. So trying to figure out how to, maybe incorporate that into infrastructure programs, but then also look at it as an environmental justice component of work too. So, you're investing in roads and utilities. Why aren't you investing more in community food as a form of resiliency?
Sure. Does the City of Trenton support this work, or how does the City of Trenton support this work, and how do local healthcare institutions in Trenton support?
I'm going to throw that one to Bitnari.
So we work with the city to turn on water at all the community gardens. So they support in that way. We also have a really good partnership with local leaders as well. So they kind of support what we do and get the word out. And then local healthcare institutions, we are in this working group with the Trenton Health team so that we can support healthy eating in the community. Did I miss anything, Jim?
No, that's good. Yeah, just working through, different community partnerships to make sure everybody's aware of the work and that your efforts are complementing others. So we've worked with New Jersey Department of Health on farmers market or supporting faith-based gardens. So yeah, just making sure the work complements what else is going on.
Thank you. Are your leadership staff at ISLES members of the community?
Yeah, our board and staff are, a large part are, folks from the community. So we just want to make sure that, we're representative of the community.
Okay. This is a question that I had as well, but someone beat me to it. If you could elaborate a little bit more on what a rain garden is versus a regular garden?
Sure. A rain garden is designed specifically to capture stormwater or just slow it down on its way to the stormwater or combined sewer system, which is the case in many older cities. So it's a flood control measure. It can also be, another water conservation measure.
Okay. Do you have suggestions for lowering the carbon footprint or CO2 emissions in comparison to other sources of food?
Well, promoting local food really reduces the miles that it has to travel. So, and especially with the pandemic, I think it's really important to really relocalize the food system. So you know where your food is coming from, but then there are also economic development benefits to it. So you're paying people to produce it when you're doing value-added processing. So what you're making like salsa or jam or dried food or prepared food, if it's got a local connection, you're feeding the local economy and not, purchasing food that's coming halfway across the country.
Okay. And I know we're running low on time, so maybe just one or two more questions. What additional testing or actions taken to ensure contaminants from industrialized soil are not transferred to edible plants?
So making sure that you're continuing to test. So the soil testing technology continues to evolve. So, what we may have tested, 30 or 40 years ago if there's more advanced technology now available, we'll find areas that of concern. So just either making sure that people are not growing in ground where there's, materials of concern, or, doing exclusively raised beds. So, most of the gardens that we develop now are raised bed gardens just for soil safety, but then also from a maintenance perspective too. It's more accessible if you can, have your beds off the ground a little bit, where you can sit on the ledge and not be, down on your knees in the dirt.
I just had my husband build me a raised garden, so I don't have to go on my knees or my butt. I could stand up and garden.
That's great.
All right, and the last question is whether or not this model has been replicated in other cities.
Absolutely. There are community gardens probably in every state, and it's when you think about victory gardens from World War II, World War I, they're a really critical source of food. So the American Community Garden Network has a kind of good resources and can help you understand the scale of gardening across the nation.
I want you to know that was a question I had in reserve, if we didn't get a ton of questions, is whether or not your efforts could be tied back, if the origins could be tied back to victory gardens. That's something that we're looking to maybe explore a little bit for one of our upcoming bulletin issues. So you would say that is where its origin maybe would have started for community gardens?
Yeah, that can be one of the origins. But, before, World War II and the kind of the refrigeration and the interstate highway system, all your food was local. You were getting your eggs locally. You were growing produce yourself or getting it from very nearby. So really, promoting local food and its values is critical, especially now.
Well, thank you both so much. I can't think of a better way to have spent our time on Earth Day. I really found your presentation very helpful and very useful. I don't know if you saw the comments, but everybody was saying thank you, and this is great. So kudos to you both, and kudos to ISLES for the work that you're doing. We have recorded today's webinar, so if our attendees know of individuals that maybe would benefit from listening to it, you can go to the link on your screen now where it says View Previous Webinar Recordings, and you can find today's webinar and all previous ones. Give us a week or two to get it up there, but it will be up there. We do have quite a few webinars coming up, as our new normal is predominantly doing outreach in a virtual environment. So check out what we have coming up. And if you don't already subscribe to FEMA Region 2 News, there's a link on your screen for that as well. There is a very short 3-question poll on your screen. If you could let us know what